morning, Chuck.
Good morning, Will.
Thank you for being here. And it's my pleasure and privilege to have Chuck Ondo here. If you remember from the past a couple of episodes, Michelle, the military forward journalist, he told me like, hey, you need to talk to Chuck. He has full of stories. So here we are. All right.
So, those are big shoes to fill.
so based on your bio that he sent me, said you served in USMC, the Marine Corps, and then you were a state police detective and sniper. Ooh. And then you were senior trainer, and then at the St. Joe Care, right? And then now your current roles, you run a Failure Men's Grooming, right? As well as you're a sergeant at arms at the Joint Task Force, and as well as a co-founder of Semper Fi Mission. Okay, so it's a lot of stuff. Okay, so
buckle up.
Buckle up. That's exactly. All right. So, is there anything to add for all this description, or
no? You covered the basics.
All right,
but that covers probably a 40-year. Career of working.
All right, wonderful. And you are currently now live in Jefferson Hills.
Correct.
Right. So usually I like to start there because we have 90 neighborhoods in Pittsburgh, and sometimes people don't know where things are. So let me show the audience where Jefferson Hills is. So it's right here, guys. So our office right here in Pittsburgh at the Point State Park, near Point State Park. And this is Jefferson Hills, about 13 miles.
30 minutes, yeah.
30 minutes.
Miles, yeah.
All right. So, geography lesson for now. All right. So, I want to hear your life story. I'm a life story addict. So,
awesome.
No pun intended. But
right.
All right.
I get it. So let's just start. I was born and raised here in Pittsburgh, and I grew up in the little town of West Mifflin. I grew up right near Kennywood Park. Had a great upbringing. My father was a steel worker. My father was one of 14. My mom was one of 10. So we had two huge families, a ton of cousins. And I grew up in a middle-class house. My father was a steel worker, and my mother was a homemaker. And I had 3 brothers and 3 sisters. So grew up in a tiny little house, but never really wanted for anything growing up. All my needs were met. And growing up in West Mifflin, like a blue-collar town, really gave me a perspective, or kind of sheltered me from the outside world. Like a lot of my older brothers and my older male cousins, when they graduated from high school, they went to work in the steel industry. In the 70s and early 80s, it was booming. So I kind of thought that's the way I was going to go. But God had a different plan for me. And I actually felt a calling to go in the Marine Corps. And how that happened, the quick story, I was a high school runner, and I was running cross country. And we got done with one of our racing events. And there was an athlete, he was a year older than me, that had joined the Marine Corps. And he was back and doing like a recruiting duty. So he was back with the recruiters. So at the end of this race, he was standing there, and he was in his dress blue uniform. It was a perfect fall evening. The sun was setting, and I literally felt like the skies parted, and a voice came down and said, "That's what I want you to be." So I remember that first day that I came home, and I told my mom, "Mom, I just want to let you know I've decided what I want to do." And she said, "What's that?" And I said, "I want to go in the military." And she said, "Well, what branch?" And I said, "The Marine Corps." And she said, "Absolutely not." So the funny side of that is, so I went to my father. Now, my father enlisted in World War II at the age of 17. He talked his father into allowing him to enlist. And he enlisted just months after his older brother was killed in action in the Battle of Normandy. So I went to my dad. I was like, "Dad, I want to go in the military just like you went." And he pretty much said, "Well, sorry, Chuck, your mom's in charge." So I went through the whole process, taking the test, being accepted into the Marine Corps, passing the physical fitness test, passing the academic test. But I had to wait until I was 18 to enlist.
So you don't need her signature.
Yeah, exactly. So something that happened, and this is another part of my life that's very poignant to point out, is my my wanting to serve. So on October 23rd, 1983, there was the first major terrorist attack on our U.S. troops, and that happened in Beirut, Lebanon. And I remember coming home from school that day, and my family was there watching the news, and there was the news story about 243 Marines and sailors were killed that day. A guy drove a truck full of explosives into a barracks. And I remember when I walked into the living room, my mom said, "See, Chuck, that's why I don't want you to be a Marine." And I told her, "No, Mom, that's why I have to be a Marine." It was my 9/11. Like a lot of folks, they after 9/11 had that call to serve, but mine happened earlier. So on my 18th birthday, I enlisted in the Marine Corps. And that morning, the recruiter picked me up, and I raised my right hand, and I became a Marine. And to this day, and to all of the pieces of my puzzle that you'll get to hear through police career, through being in prison, all in traumatic situations. Being a Marine is what the basis of what I am. It has so moved me. It's so forged me into who I am, and where I have had to reach down and have some fortitude in life. Physical and mental. A lot of it all came from starting my life as a Marine.
Yeah, as you're telling me that sequence of events, I just like Hollywood story. when you're at the, when you're describing like a sunset, and it's like, oh, like a bit.
Yeah, right. Well.
And then when your mom, when you were being sworn with, and as the recruiter picked you up, I wonder, where was the mom?
Yeah, she was still sleeping when I came home and told her that I did it. She didn't speak to me for a couple of weeks. She was really hurt. And then it was about 4 months until I finally went into basic training. Over that time, she totally accepted it and accepted me, and was loving and caring and 100% supportive.
Yeah. So how many siblings do you have?
So I have three brothers and 3 sisters.
Okay.
I have one younger brother, and everyone else is older. So I'm second to the youngest.
Okay. And only you serve in the military?
My younger brother did as well. So I kind of, all my uncles and older cousins all served in World War II, in Korea and Vietnam. And then there was a break in the action. I kind of restarted it. So currently I have a barber shop. And it's on McKnight Road. It's called Valor Men's Grooming. And I have the shop dedicated to my family. I've had over 40 people in the military. 40 people in my immediate family serve in the military.
Wow.
So I served, and then my younger brother actually enlisted in the Navy, and not too long ago retired from the Navy. He had a great career.
Wow. Thank you for your service.
Oh, absolutely, my pleasure. It's amazing how you get, we just had Veterans Day a couple weeks ago, on the Marine Corps birthday, and so many people, you're walking in the street, they see your tattoos, or you're wearing a hat.
Your build, like from 100 yards, people could tell.
It's part of my past.
Right. So have you ever been deployed? Look at the timeline here.
When I served, it was during the Cold War. I did get activated one time. We went on a mission to Nicaragua, and it had something to do with Russia had moved some subs off the coast. So we went there just on a training mission. It was kind of a show of force. And then everything de-escalated, and we came back. But I did get deployed to Okinawa, Japan for a year. And that whole year was all just training missions, jungle training. And I worked with explosives my whole time in the military. I was, it's called, the formal term is ammunition technician. So I worked with ammunition.
So what did you guys do in the ammunition? You you defuse it, or you actually install it?
So the first part is just getting the right ammunition to each unit that's training. And there are so many requirements. If you're moving explosives, certain things can be transported together. Certain things have to be transported on a different vehicle. And then there's a constant influx of the ammunition coming on rail car or by ship. And then you've got to put it into the bunkers. And then, of course, if ammunition was expired or didn't go off, you would have to take it and you would have to detonate. You'd have like an exercise to detonate any rounds that were considered unstable.
Okay, so you guys were responsible in making sure that when it's needed, it's there, and
Correct.
and the right equipment for the right battle, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's already there. It's there. Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I just I remember I think before we started recording, I was telling Chuck about I'm like I love watching movies. I'm a story addict, and when you mentioned that about the ammunition, the scene in my brain was the Saving Private Ryan when they were about to climb, and it's like, okay, they're stuck, and they like, how can they blow up this so they could climb up, right? So somebody had I don't know, like a hack it right with the pipe, and then put it in, and then put the explosive in, and then like blow it up from the outside or deep inside. It's
right.
Like, wow, and you have to do it while people are shooting at you. That's crazy. That's like.
To add to what you're saying, to add to your point, was when I went through the jungle training on the island of Okinawa, the month that we went through it, it rained for like 7 days straight. So we were miserable, heavy monsoon type downpours. And so you're wet, you're cold, it's muddy. And we're doing these training exercises. And, as young guys, we're 18, 19 years old, you're complaining. There was an older gunnery sergeant that was in charge of us who had been in Vietnam. And he kind of pulled us aside and said, you guys are complaining about this, and you don't even have anyone shooting at you. And he shared some stories about being in Vietnam when the war was going on, and being in the jungle and how dangerous it is. But then on top of it, people are shooting at you. So it gave us a different outlook.
Yeah, like, totally.
Okay, it's not
so at the end of 5 years, why did you decide to quit?
So I loved the Marine Corps. I just felt like there was more for me. And at that point, I didn't know that 2 years later that the Gulf War would happen and everything else. But it felt like, for those 6 years that I was in, 4 active and 2 in the reserves, that it was just training and wasn't really action. And, being someone that's trained up, I really had a thought of going in and doing police work, using my military background to get involved in police work.
Okay. So you totally quit, not even as a reserve afterwards. Okay. All right. So how, what made you decide that you wanted to be a state trooper, right? And then as opposed to other probably branch in the law enforcement, right? There's several.
That's a great question, Will. And for me, all of our branches of military are great, but the Marine Corps has the history of being the toughest branch, of being the hardest one to get into. It's the few, the proud, the Marines. So that I was drawn to that. Very similar in the state of Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania State Police have this reputation of being the best trained law enforcement group in Pennsylvania. The state police in Pennsylvania was the first state police agency in this country. So its inception was in 1905. So I thought, well, if I'm going to be the best and be a Marine, I would also like to be the best and become a Pennsylvania State Trooper.
Wonderful. And then you mentioned that you're in the Special Emergency Response Team. Is it a synonym to SWAT team?
Very, very similar. So our team, which is called SERT, Special Emergency Response Team, is exactly what a SWAT team is. Just a little bit of a change in the acronym. But that was as my career went on. I started off like I was our class president when we were in the academy. I was always put into these leadership roles, thrived on that. And when I became a state trooper in Pennsylvania back in the 80s, you weren't allowed to come back to your home area. So I couldn't come back to the Pittsburgh area. And being a young single guy at the time, I chose to go to the Philadelphia area. So I became a state trooper in the Philadelphia area. And initially,
there were all the actions happening.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I thought. There were some openings up in like the northeast part of Pennsylvania and the Poconos, but I thought, no, I'm 23, 24 years old. I want to go where the bad guys are. And got stationed in Philadelphia.
So, all right. So let me ask you this. So what was the most exhilarating experience? Could be scary or it could be, I don't know, like what's the most memorable? If you could tell me like a number one or probably top three or any kind of that, if you have to write down things that you can pass down the stories to your grandkids in the future,
Yeah.
what would that be?
So I was probably in my 4th or 5th year as a state trooper. After my 3rd year, I started to work undercover. So I was a narcotics, gambling, prostitution. We were considered the troop vice unit. And I was working, we were actually serving a search warrant on a building. It was an electronics store in the north part of Philadelphia. North Philly is considered like one of the more dangerous areas. The area I was in, the slang name for it is the Badlands. And so we're in the Badlands and I'm serving a search warrant. And it was the middle of June. It was really hot. So you have to picture me. Most people that know me now know this. I still have the same short hair. And so I had hair down to my shoulders. I had a large goatee. I was dressed in, street clothes. And the only thing that I was wearing that identified me as a police officer is like a pullover jacket, like a little nylon jacket. On the back, it said State Police Trooper. And so the building we were doing the search warrant on was so hot. We were in the basement and we had so much evidence in that basement that we needed to rent a 28-foot rent-a-truck to get it out of there. So we're waiting for the truck to get there. I stepped out onto the street and it was the corner of 8th and Germantown in Philadelphia, notorious area, bad area. And I was pretty much getting a breath of air. When all of a sudden I hear a vehicle coming and it came down and I hear people inside the vehicle screaming and it stops. There was a stoplight there. It stops at the stoplight and the rear passenger, there was 4 men in the vehicle, driver, passenger, and then the same in the back. The guy behind the driver jumps out and he's screaming at the guys in the front. And all of a sudden I see him bring out a gun and he takes 4 or 5 shots into the front of the car. And I mean, it was 15 feet from me. And, obviously I was wearing bulletproof vest and my gun underneath. So I just identified myself as a state trooper and pointed my gun on him and said, "State Police, stop." He looked at me, and again, he was probably confused because I've got long hair and a beard, and he might have just thought I was another bad guy, and he took off running. So at the time, I had a portable radio. So you know how the radio's in the car?
Yeah.
These portable radios, they do not work very well. And the state police, we're not connected directly to Philadelphia Police Department, and I'm chasing this guy. And now, I'm 30 years old. I'm in shape. And this guy, it was like a movie. The guy running down the street, he's pulling trash cans, he's jumping over people. People are getting pushed out of the way. And I'm on this little radio, I'm calling it in, we're at 14th in Germantown, 18th in Germantown, 19th in, whatever street we got on. And then at one point, he ducks down an alley. So I slow down. And I don't want to turn the alley too fast. I want to be cautious. So I have my gun. I come around the alley and I don't see anybody, and I look down and so I'm going real slow. I turn my radio off and I got about 100 foot down into the alley and I hear a dog just barking its head off. And then I hear someone screaming and I looked into a yard. So the guy that had done the shooting had ran from me. He jumped into a yard and he climbed into a doghouse. Oh. So he's in this doghouse. There's this big Rottweiler outside of the doghouse with his arm on the guy's, and the guy's screaming. He has the guy locked in on his arm. And I still don't know if he has that gun. Where is the gun? Yeah. So he's like, "Get me out of here. Get me out of here." And the dog's shaking. And I'm like, "Where's the gun? Where's the gun?" He said, "Get me out." I said, "Tell me where the gun is and I'll get you out of here." He's like, "It's 2 doors back in a blue trash can." So I ran back 2 doors down, opened it up, and I found the gun inside there. So I pick it up, make it safe, and I come back. When I came back to him, the homeowners from the people that owned the dog were up on their deck, and they're yelling to the guy, "Just hold still, just hold still." I still don't know if he has another weapon. Very chaotic
Yes,
scene.
yes.
At that point, the cavalry arrives. There's probably 30 police officers, that come. And the police sergeant that got out, he's like, "Hey, trooper, what do you have?" I said, "Well, I witnessed this guy do a shooting at 8th and Germantown." And he looks at me and goes, "How'd you get here?" I said, "I chased him the whole way."
It's already 18.
Yeah. So we actually were able to take the guy into custody. So when you talk about stories, that was, to witness that, and then what the police sergeant told me was, he said, "Oh, so this was the guy that did the shooting." He said the driver was killed and the passenger was seriously injured.
Wow.
So this guy was a murder suspect. But to chase him through all those blocks, so I don't know. I don't know if there's going to be another story. I've got tons of them in my Rolodex, but
Right.
that one definitely stands out.
Wow.
To run someone down.
And, like probably almost like 10 blocks that you ran, right?
I think it was closer to 17 blocks when they figured it all out.
Wow. Okay. All right. So, yeah. So, what I'm imagining right now is like when you're running in that kind of situation, so like everything like is slowing down, right? Because you're hyper focused on that guy, make sure you don't lose them, right? And then you keep on running, and then things that you jump, things that you have to go through. You're like, I jumped that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in hindsight, you look back. I remember, getting a ride back to that location and looking at the street and thinking, man, it just ran through all this traffic, all this foot traffic. Anything bad could have happened.
Yeah.
It's afterwards, and this plays the kind of into my story as well. At the time, as a police officer, you think you're invincible. And what some people may think is, "Oh my God, that's a scary situation. And are you going to have any PTSD because of that?" The problem that I kind of had with my 10 years as a police officer, being in those kind of situations constantly, was, "Hey, man, this is what I signed up for. I'm okay. I don't need to talk to anybody. I don't need any counseling. I got this. This is what I do, and this is who I am." And you kind of you stuff it down and you think, okay, no one got hurt. It was a win, in a situation. But after doing that for years and being involved in other SWAT situations, hostage situations, afterwards, reliving the incident and knowing that, oh man, I probably shouldn't have made it through that. How am I still here? It does start to play on your conscience, and it does start to play on your, kind of wears you down.
Yeah.
When you're involved in those kind of incidents.
Yeah. So was there any point during this as a law enforcement, as a detective, or as part of your SWAT, as SERT, that you said that I don't want to do this anymore, or this is just too tiring, or this is like breaking me down, or is there like a one single moment, or is it just like accumulation of stuff?
There was definitely an accumulation. There was one incident between my SERT and my undercover things. There was a period of time where I was in and around 3 different shootings. I had an informant of mine actually get killed.
Oh, sorry.
And when you're doing that, I was in a high-speed police crash, chasing a suspect. Again, each incident, you kind of brush it off. But over time, what I realized was that it was wearing me down. And instead of wearing me down and doing it the right way, saying, "Hey, I need some time off," or "I need a mental health day," or whatever, unfortunately, I started to escape from the trauma and the problems with alcohol. And later, it ended up being with narcotics as well. So something that I never would have thought, but very few people wake up and say, "Hey, I want to be an alcoholic today," or, "I want to go shoot heroin." It's something that's gradual. And for me, it was wanting to escape from the trauma, from the hazardous situations. And it is a form of post-traumatic stress, is when you're thinking about those situations and you don't want to think about them. They keep playing over in your head. And alcohol and drugs, for me, became my escape.
And then your peers didn't catch that. I mean, they didn't notice probably your performance didn't get sloppy, or they didn't.
That's a great question. So what had happened was I was involved in all these incidents, and I decided it was time to maybe not work undercover anymore. And I had taken a promotion test. You go from being a trooper to a corporal to a sergeant, and I was going to be promoted to corporal, which meant I'd go back in uniform. So I thought, okay, this is my clean slate. I'm going to go back in uniform and not be around this all the time, and maybe my life will get a little bit of sanity, right? So I go back into uniform, but unfortunately, when I went into uniform, I was still working out with the general public, and there was a period where I investigated 3 teenage suicides in 1 week. I was the first officer. I was the investigating officer on a Monday, a Wednesday, and a Friday. And then there was an incident that really kind of changed my life. So I was a corporal. I was back in uniform, and we had an infant drowning.
Oh no!
And I got called to the house, and it was in a small town called Frackville. The baby was one of 7, and the mom was about 28 years old, and she had 7 children. The house was very chaotic. I get there, and I find an 18-month-old baby face down in the bathtub. And the kids were running around screaming. And we got there very quickly. Like, the 911 call came in. It took me 2 minutes and 30-some seconds to get there. So when I get there, the mom was in shock. She had her hands over her face, and she wasn't moving. And so the baby had been face down in there, and I got the little guy out, and I gave him CPR and got some water out of his lungs. And EMS got there, and they transported him to the hospital. We got him breathing again. However, that night, about an hour later, he passed away. And that was one of the incidents, Will, that again was a turning point for me, where it was kind of a breaking point for me. I can't say that's an excuse to go drink or use drugs or whatever, but it was it was devastating, because I got home that night, and my baby son was 18 months old.
Oh, that's the thought.
And I remember taking him out of the crib and just holding him and thinking, I'm his protector. I never want something to happen that just happened to that little guy. And it's this overwhelming feeling of, did I do everything right? Did I do CPR correctly? How's a mother going to feel because she doesn't get to hold her little boy like I'm holding my little boy? And that was one of those breaking points where I tell police officers nowadays, because I counsel police officers, and I tell them, when you go through something like that, take some time off, go talk to a professional, get close with God, go talk to your pastor, and to help you through those kind of things, because what a police officer sees on a day in and day out basis, is something that society can't even imagine.
Yeah.
The domestic situations, the shootings, the bodies in car crashes, the notifying people of a death in the family. Those kind of things all kind of wore on me. And at the same time, my home life was my first wife. Our relationship was falling apart. And a lot of that happened because I worked all these years undercover, and I fell into alcohol, and I was away from home a lot. So you've got everything falling apart, and I knew my marriage was falling apart. And then I see this baby drowned in a bathtub, and I was kind of thinking, is this what my life's headed for? Something tragic like this. And so as a police officer, one of the things as my responsibility was to be in charge of the evidence room. And then when evidence has to be destroyed, it's part of what you do. You sign a report, and you either take it to an incinerator or flush it or whatever. And it was right after that infant drowning and my marriage falling apart that I used drugs for the first time. And I used cocaine. And when I worked undercover, I used to ask people all the time, why do you use this stuff? Like, what's the lure? And a lot of people would say to me that, like, Trooper, if you knew what my life was like, you'd want to escape from it too. So hearing that in my head, and I was in a police bathroom signed a report, was supposed to flush it. Instead of flushing it down, I used it. And exactly what I heard is going to happen happened. And that was, I totally was escaped. You know, my mind was clear. I felt euphoric. I wasn't crying. I wasn't upset. But now I've crossed a line.
Right.
Where I've done something that I never should have. And and that started to happen repeatedly, you know.
Right.
And then I started going into cases that were supposed to be destroyed from decades ago and using the drugs there. So my life, and to answer your question, there's no one that knew what was going on. And it wasn't like I took drugs and went and partied with people and was the life of the party. My addiction was very, it was sad, pitiful is what it was I would go back to my apartment, lock myself in the apartment, lock myself in the bathroom in the apartment, use drugs and get this temporary fix, but then hate myself for hours afterwards. And it was a vicious cycle. And it lasted for about 6 months.
Wow. All right. So, I have to ask this, you know, if you don't mind, you know, if you mind that, you know, just let me know.
Sure.
So how did finally catch you?
Oh, great point. Yeah. So there was a period of about 6 months where I wasn't using narcotics during the day when I was working. It would be once I got off my shift. And the person, I started dating someone else, and the person that I was dating really noticed something was going on with me. And she said, you know, I drive past your house and your light's on, but you don't answer the phone, you don't answer the door. You know, are you cheating on me? And I finally came clean with her, and I said, no, I'm not cheating on you with a person, but I have a problem. And I told her about my situation with cocaine, and she was just blown away because she's like, Chuck, you're one of these guys, you know, over my 10-year police career, I had like 30 accommodations, like always being put up for awards and, you know, above and beyond bravery and in the course of your duty. And so I explained to her, this is what happened and how it started. And she just wants me to get help. So I checked myself into a rehab. And I was still going to work Monday through Friday, 8 to 4, but I checked into a place called Rehab After Work and totally lied to them, told them, you know, never told them that I was a police officer. You know, I didn't want to be, and I went to a town that was further away. And I talked about, you know, being addicted, but I never told them the circumstances surrounding. Right. So no one really knew how that all came about is I contacted someone. I started to learn that when you're in recovery, you need someone, they call it a sponsor, that kind of helps you along. So I contacted a sponsor, someone to be a sponsor, and that person was very helpful the first day or two. But then we had gotten in some type of argument, and this person was pretty close to me. And so it would be the only my girlfriend at the time and this guy were the only two people on earth that knew what I did. And we get in an argument, and the guy says, you know, if you want to argue with me, I'm going to call your captain. And I was like, you're trying to help me, and now you want to hurt me? I was like, and I didn't think he would do it. But I went to work the next day, and when I walked into the barracks, there was big yellow tape across the evidence room. It said, under investigation, no entry. So at that point, I knew that my number was up. I knew that there would be some way forensically that they would, because there was only 3 of us that had access to that. And I had tampered with these cases. So that the person did admit to it later down the road. And said that they did call and they acted as an informant, and they were paid for that. But they kind of put it under the guise of, I was trying to help you. Yeah. You know, you would have probably killed yourself if I wouldn't have got you help. But at the time there was nothing. It was vindictive that person did it. But I've since forgiven the person. But so here was the tough part, Will. I go to work for the next 37 days. Knowing that man, it could be any minute of any day that I'm arrested.
Yeah.
And I was eventually arrested. I drove into the barracks, and the thing that really hurt was because I had a lot of training and I was a SWAT officer.
Right.
They used the SWAT team, my buddies, to take me down. You know, when I came into the barracks, there was obviously I wasn't going to fight or whatever. I had resolved in my head that, okay. And the other thing that I did is I stayed sober for those 37 days. I didn't go back to using drugs or anything at that point. And but it really hurt to get, because you train with these guys and they're like your special friends. You know, you have a bond. It's kind of like the military thing. And they felt horrible too.
Yeah.
They felt horrible, but for safety of everybody involved. And so that was one of the most devastating days of my life.
Yeah.
To go from being a state trooper where you control society to knowing that you're arrested and you have no idea how long you might spend in prison. But
yeah,
it's a rough day. Sorry, that was a long answer to that question.
Yeah, but it's very insightful. I really appreciate you sharing. You know, I could see the emotions, you know, what the but actually triggered you, you know, especially it's too close to home when you just experience such a tragedy and then you came back home and you saw, you know, a similarity, you know, it's a baby, right? And you had to go through that. And then when you mentioned about 37 days lapse time before they actually do something, I'm pretty sure that they were confused too. What, Chuck?
Yeah.
Chuck did that? Probably all through levels of escalation, and they were like a second guessing. What? Let me double check your paperwork. He didn't do it, right?
Right. That was 100% what they shared with me. It was funny. Last weekend, I was out in Phoenix, and I got together with two of the troopers that I worked with back in the day and 20 some years ago, and that's what they were saying. They're like, Chuck, when we first found out that you got arrested and that you had a problem with cocaine, they're like, I would have swore anybody but you. And so like I did spend 10 very honorable years serving, and it wasn't like I was a bad cop that finally got caught.
Yeah.
It was, you know, years of good work, messed up, but, you know, and then had to pay an ultimate price.
Right. Yeah. So those 37 days, that's all. That for me, if I were in your shoes, that's like, they would have created such anxiety, right? When you open the door, you didn't know.
Right.
On the other side.
Exactly.
When you're just out of the restroom, like probably you're like already lined up, right?
And, you know, from being on the side of, you know, serving arrest warrants on people, you know, going to my car, I'd look in the neighborhood, is someone nearby? I would be driving down, I'm looking in my rear view mirror, you know, and then when I got to work, I kind of didn't expect it at work. I thought it would be away from the barracks, you know.
Yeah.
But when it happened, it's just, you know, and you knew you're going to be on the evening news. And my parents were still alive, and my siblings, and, you know, state trooper arrested. You know, and they have your footage of you going to court and everything. And I was released on my own recognizance, posted a small bail, but yeah, it was a tough period in my life.
Yeah. So, okay, following this timeline, now you're on the other side, right? You're in prison. Well, you know, again, watching the movies, you know, usually when a cop goes into prison, bad shit happens.
Absolutely.
So how did you manage? How did you handle that?
This story will not disappoint. So my crime, which was tampering with evidence, and then ultimately charged with possession, because at some point, if you took the drugs, you were in possession of it. They were misdemeanors. So there wasn't a felony, but there was 70 counts of it.
Oh.
So they added it all together, and whatever the maximum was for each count, they did it consecutively. So kind of times 70, which I ended up at my sentencing hearing being sentenced to 24 to 48 months inside the state correctional facility. So in talking with my attorney and with everybody, I kind of thought that I might get house arrest, or I might go to the county jail for a couple months and then wear an ankle monitor. And during my sentencing hearing, I had troopers that were retired kind of come in and testify on my behalf. Active duty troopers weren't allowed, because it's still an investigation. But guys who were retired came in, and they read into the court record all of these cases that I worked on and some of the major arrests. And that's how I realized I had 31 accommodations, because it was during then that the guys had read it. What I didn't realize, we were in this courtroom and there were 9 other prisoners in the back of the jail waiting for their sentencing hearing. And they're hearing all this. Guy was a state trooper, guy made this arrest, made that arrest, blah, blah, blah.
Wow.
So they went back to the jail after their hearing, and they told everybody, hey, there's a cop coming. And the county sheriffs said they didn't know. So they put me right into population. And I'm number one, I'm just blown away, because here it is. Here's, your life has changed. I had a 5-year-old son at the time. I'm going to be going to prison. You don't know how long, because it could be that 2 years or it could be as long as 4 years. What's going to happen? And I remember I got put into like a jumpsuit, and I got a mattress and a pillow, and I go up and I set it down in this, I was on the 3rd floor, and I hear some noise, and I look around, and 5 guys came in and attacked me, and they said, hey, pig, we were waiting for you. And they just start beating me. And again, if I wasn't 6 foot tall, 200 pounds, in pretty good shape, with a will to live, I probably wouldn't have made it out of that cell. But I got out onto the tier, and I was afraid that I was going to get thrown over.
Yes.
So I was just fighting with people, and the guards see it, and they blow a whistle, and everybody kind of runs, and they put you back in your cell. So I sat back in that cell, and for the next, and these were like, instead of doors, they were like the bars. So you're in jail, there's bars, and you can hear everything. And it's 3 floors high. And you hear everybody yelling, hey, cop, and cell 387, you're dead. You're dead. Wait till you come out. Next time you come out, you're not making it down. We're going to throw you off the tower, the 3rd floor that we were on. So when the doors finally opened, I ran down the steps as fast as I could to get down onto the first ground, because it would also be near where the guards were. The guards were in like a protective bubble. And they had no idea what was going on, because they were in a soundproof booth. So I get to the bottom, and I got attacked again. And this time it was probably 20 or 30 guys. And it lasted only a few minutes, but they never got me on the ground. And so the guards came out, and they took me back into their protective bubble. And they're like, hey, are you some kind of gang leader, or are you a snitch or what? I was like, no, sir.
They didn't know.
And they clearly didn't know. And I said, no, I was a police officer, and I was just sentenced today. And in here, I don't know how, but everybody knows. And they're like, oh my God, nobody told us.
Yeah.
Nobody told us that you were. So they put me in what's called protective custody, Will. But it was just as bad, because you were safe from getting in fights, but you were in a smaller cell. You were locked up for 23 hours straight. And you'd have 1 free hour.
It's just like that what they call like solitary
confinement. Yeah.
Oh.
So I was in solitary confinement, and then I got moved to probably 4 other jails. And each time I would go into this solitary confinement, and that was just horrible. When you don't know, and the amount of time, and I would just cry, do push-ups, read the Bible, and just hope that life can turn around. And then I finally got stationed out at a prison in the middle of the state near Somerset, Pennsylvania. And so what they did is they looked at all my criminal arrests, and they looked at where people were incarcerated across the state. That particular prison, there was nobody that knew me, so they put me there. And then I did another, I think once I got there, I did another 8 months there, and no one knew that I was a cop. So it's still danger of living in prison.
Yeah.
But just not with that big X on your back.
Right. And probably that time, there's no social media.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
It's like telling everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, where did this guy go? Yeah, so yeah, it was late night or 2000. It was the year 2000.
Yeah. Wow.
So thank goodness that we missed that. So I was able to do my time, and I was able to get out, and I did the rest of the time on parole, but my life kind of got straightened back out. I got out. I worked a number of different jobs, but ended up owning a small construction company. Got married, had a daughter. So I have a son and a daughter. And life was normal for about 10 years, on and off. But at that time, I started to get involved in like AA and NA and really trying to help people that were struggling with alcohol or drugs. So that's where, the part of me that likes to serve, protect, help has never left me.
Wonderful. So when you were in jail, was that the time that you got close to your religion, to Jesus?
I did somewhat. But it wasn't until about 3 years ago that my faith has totally changed and totally have devoted my life to the Bible and to helping tell others about Jesus. But at that time, I would say I was a mediocre Christian. Still believed in God, prayed to him, of course, when you're in dangerous situation, God help me, God help me.
That's the time when we remember him, right?
Exactly.
Okay. So, so which one is first? You did you started doing the Semper Fi Mission or the Failures Men's Grouping? Okay.
So, to kind of follow along with the story, the other thing that I want to share about my time in prison, when I was a police officer and I would arrest somebody, and they would go to court and they get found guilty and maybe they get sentenced to, I've arrested people for murder that got sentenced to 40 years. I never really thought about them as a person again. Not in a derogatory way or as, oh, you're not a human. No, I mean, you just don't think about their life. You said, okay, they got what they deserved, whatever. But then when I got into prison, and I started to meet people and I started to hear their stories,
this is presumably the last 8 months.
What's that?
This was happening when you were at the last 8 months
Absolutely.
in Somerset, where you got a chance to actually talk to human beings, right?
Exactly.
Not in the solitary.
Not in the solitary. Right. Yeah. So I'm meeting people and I start to hear their stories and I start to hear, when I was a police officer, I used to look at someone that maybe was addicted to drugs or about to go to prison. I'm like, man, what is wrong with you? And what I learned after being incarcerated, instead of asking what is wrong with someone, I asked, well, what has happened to you? Like, man, what series of events have happened? And you meet a lot of people, and even people that we work with day in and day out on our mission, there's always a backstory. Maybe it was, not having a father. Maybe it was being abused as a young boy, a young girl. There's always a backstory. Like I said earlier, most people don't wake up and say, hey, I'm going to be a heroin addict today, or I want to be an alcoholic. There's always traumatic events that lead to it, that people try to escape or they were put in. And a lot of the guys that we work with now that are struggling had spent time in the military and were injured. They were combat injured, put on pain pills for 18 months, and then just said, okay, we're going to release you from the military. So these people feel like they've lost their entire purpose in life. I was for 14 years, I was a Navy SEAL. And now I'm just someone that that got a medical discharge from the military and they're physically hooked on pain pills, and they go out and chase it. So that's who we're running into a lot with our Semper Fi mission are these veterans that served, were injured, or for whatever reason, the PTSD caused, alcoholism or addiction, not caused it, but led to it. And so after getting out of jail, I'll pick up with, I had an asphalt business for years. And then about in 2010, I sold that business. The economy slowed. And I thought about it. And I never thought that becoming a barber would lead to a nonprofit, but that's exactly what had happened. So I go to hair school, learn how to do hair, and then I apprentice at a barbershop. And in 2010 or 12, I become a barber. And that's eventually what led me back here to Pittsburgh. I came back to Pittsburgh to take care of my dad, but then I started working at barbershops and some hair salons around here. And what I realized was that the barbershop is a really nice way to have a conversation with someone. I have a private suite, so people come in. So I live on the South Hills of Pittsburgh, and my barbershop's in the North Hills.
Yes, I noticed that. So let me show this to the audience. You can see this is Fellowman's Grooming. And yeah, I noticed that you live in Jefferson Hills, but your barber is not way up north, but it's in the north side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's quite a drive.
Absolutely. So driving from that, I drove down 51 and then through the tunnels and across bridges. So I started to see people with signs. Hey, veteran, need help.
Which is very common.
Can you spare change?
Yes.
Right. So I started giving people a card to come into my barbershop to get a haircut. And it started to work. People started to come in. They would take a bus or someone would give them a ride. They come in the shop and I start asking them, like, man, what happened to you? What happened to you? I kind of told them my story, and I can relate to it. A lot of people, the past of incarceration, they have a stigma about them. They're addicted to drugs, and I would tell them my story about how I got sober, how I got clean, and a haircut feels great. Even when you're in a good mood, it makes you feel better about yourself. Yeah. And I would turn people around in the mirror when I was done with them and say, hey, let's continue with this. How about, have you ever thought of going to detox? Have you ever thought about going to treatment? I'll drive you right now. And when you get them in that moment and you're able to drive someone to a detox or to the VA hospital, to the emergency room, it's kind of what started my idea of having a nonprofit.
So going back about how the Semper Fi Mission started, and then you also mentioned about the alcoholism. So
Sure.
Did that occur to you?
So it was back in 2000 that I struggled with, the narcotics and cocaine and everything. And then I get out, and when I restarted my life, after parole, I started to be a casual drinker again. And then unfortunately, in 2011 or 12, I had gone through a second divorce. And I was working in a barbershop in Philadelphia, and we served alcohol to our clients. But again, I was just at a low point in my life, and I started to drink almost every day, just a beer or two. And then I'd go play softball and have a beer or two. And then I'd go out on the weekends and I'd get drunk. And, what I've learned now is, when you have an issue with alcohol or drugs or pills or whatever, you're more susceptible to falling into having a problem with that. And even though I drank successfully for years, here I was in my late 50s, and alcohol became a huge issue for me. And I got to the point that I was drinking every day. And I moved back here to take care of my father. So I moved back to Pittsburgh, and being with him, for the most part, it kept my life under control. I was responsible because I had to take care of him and his medical needs. But when my father passed away is when my alcoholism just went through the roof. And it was to the point where I wasn't even functional anymore. Wow. There'd be 2 or 3 day binges where I'm drinking. And so I did I did finally go to treatment. I look at my life, and God has put certain people in my life at certain times to really help me. And God had sent me an angel this time, who I'm married to now. Her name's Laura. And we started to casually date. And then, of course, my alcoholism creeps in, and she realizes that I'm a mess. She didn't even know anything about my past. But she just kept saying to me, Chuck, you're a good guy. You love to help people, and you've done so much good in the past. You have to go get some help. You've got to get treatment because you can't stop drinking on your own. And at that point, I had spent 90 days at the VA hospital here in Pittsburgh and went through an intensive inpatient drug and alcohol treatment. And I actually got a lot of counseling. And what the counseling did was not only it let me get control of the alcohol, but it put to bed a lot of the things that were haunting me from my days on the state police force. It was, some of those shootings and traumatic incidents and things that I was involved in, I was able to talk through with counselors, and it was a huge help. So it was shortly after coming out of that treatment is where we pick up, and where I have my own little barber shop, and I'm picking people up. So around that same time, I had a gentleman come in, very similar to the story I was telling you. He was a Marine, was hit in combat, was put on pain pills, was medically discharged. And when he came back here to Pittsburgh, he was a homeless heroin addict. He lived in the town of Homewood, lived in abandoned houses, and he finally went through the VA hospital, went through their treatment. The guy's name is Ken. Ken is literally like a brother to me. Ken started coming to the barbershop because someone had told him about me. Like, hey, there's this guy, Chuck. He like you, he likes to help people. He used to be a Marine. So Ken comes in and we start talking and realize I hear Ken's story. Like, hey, what happened to you, Ken? And I hear what happened to Ken and how he's been sober now for about 4 years at that time when we meet. I'm sober about 90 days. So we start trying to tackle the world's problems ourselves. No, Ken and I would go down into Pittsburgh here. We would go to 6th and Wood Street. We would go to the tent encampments. We'd bring pizza or sandwiches with us and would go around. And what Ken and I had found out is what's missing from a lot of people's lives is their faith in God. And we would walk up to people in a tent camp and just say, hey, man, can I pray for you? Mm-hmm. And just watch floodgates come, watch people open up and like, yeah, I'm having problems. And, they got this medical issue, but then they're also addicted to heroin and alcohol. And you start praying for people. And so around the time that I started to help people, like God restored everything in my life. And I got a phone call from some guys that I used to work undercover with that are still in Philadelphia. And they tell me that they're putting together this program. It's called the Center for Addiction and Recovery Education. It's a program to teach police officers about the disease of addiction. And you're like, well, why would police officers need to know that? Well, because they're the ones on the front lines out there dealing with people all the time. And if you can connect someone to treatment, instead of just arresting them for a petty crime, this is where this class really came into play. So I started to talk to police officers all over Pittsburgh here, and then also sharing my personal story. So back when I got out of jail, I didn't even tell anybody that I was a policeman. Like now I'm open about it and I'll talk about it, but I was so embarrassed. I had so much guilt and so much shame about being arrested and being like the black sheep of the state police that I just wouldn't talk much about it. But here I am now, these guys really restored everything in my life. I'm now out talking to police officers and telling them, hey, if you're struggling with alcohol, get into a treatment program. If you tell your superior officers now, they'll work with you. Don't wait until you have a DUI or something and then want to get help. So I started going around and teaching this class. And it was about 2 years ago that I went and was teaching this Center for Addiction and Recovery Education to all of the probation officers in Allegheny County. So I was at their office, and it was a 3-day period, and I trained about 90 officers with our curriculum. And one of the officers said to me, he said, Chuck, I'm the probation officer that oversees Veterans Court. Would you consider coming in to talk to the people in Veterans Court? Veterans Court is right at the courthouse. It's like, I don't know how to use this. It's a step-up version of being on regular probation. Mm-hmm. You have a lot more requirements. But the ultimate goal is, because you were a veteran, you're going to be under more stringent supervising guidelines. However, when this is done with, we'll expunge your record. So it makes a lot of sense. Or, so he said, with your story, there's that word, would you consider coming in and speaking to the men and women that are in Veterans Court? So I went into the courthouse and I spoke. And at this point, we hadn't formed the Semper Fi Mission. It was just me and Ken out there helping people. So I tell them what we do, give everyone a card to come get a free haircut at my shop. And a day later, I get a call from the warden at Allegheny County Jail. And she said, Chuck, I got a call from the judge at Veterans Court. She said she was so impressed with your story. I just want to let you know that I would love for you to come in and speak to the veterans that are incarcerated here. So Allegheny County Jail has something set up specifically for veterans. It's one of the pods that's at the jail, and it's very well decorated, and they still try to honor the veterans, even though they're incarcerated. So about 2 years ago, I went in and spoke, and I talked for about an hour and a half, and so many of the guys liked the story or could relate to me that the judge or the warden asked me to come back the following week. And then I came back the third week, and then she's like, Chuck, would you consider just being a regular? We'll get you an ID card and a badge, and you can come in every Monday if you want. So I was there this morning. There's on average between 60 and 80 men on that pod.
Wow.
And this morning was our 91st visit inside there. So it's been remarkable so with the Semper Fi Mission, and I'm just going to tell one more story, and then I'm going to kind of streamline this one more little excerpt. So 2 years ago, around this period, it was Veterans Day. Ken and I had gone into 4 different prisons. And Monday through Thursday, we went to 4 different prisons. So the state prison in Mercer, I think we went to the prison in Harrisburg here, and then the juvenile hall. And on that 4th night, I had a dream. And that's where the Semper Fi Mission was born. This dream, I got up and I was addressing a large crowd of prisoners, like hundreds of guys in blue, like something you'd see like if you were looking at a video or movie from San Quentin, out in LA.
Yeah.
So I stand up, and in my dream, I yell, "Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Chuck. This is my brother, Ken, and we represent the Semper Fi Mission, and we're here to tell you about the Lord." And when I said Semper Fi Mission, Semper Fi has always meant a lot to me. It means always faithful. Semper Fidelis from Latin. At 3:15 in the morning, I sat up in bed and I Googled semperfimission.org, and the URL was available. And I bought it at 3:15 a.m. Called Ken the next day. Ken, God gave me a name for the mission. A couple days later, we were trying to think of what our main pillars and what's our mission statement going to be, and it's just the basic idea that we want is one person helping another person, pulling them up from the pit that they're in, and leading them to God, leading them to Christ.
As you're speaking, I just turn on this the screen to the audience, and then when you're like pulling them up, and that animation, it's like perfect.
Hats off to Will on that producing, the background producing.
Oh, well,
but yeah,
it's your website. It's awesome. That's like the symbolism right there. It's like perfect.
So I sat down to do a logo, and this came to me within seconds. Literally, okay, and then we had to find something similar online and that was well done there. Good job. And thank you. So I called Ken the next day and said, "Hey Ken, we have to do this formally." So we formed the Semper Fi Mission, and again, you talk about your story, my story being a catalyst to something and how God's involved in everything that we do. Shortly after coming up with the logo and the name, I get an email from Citizens Bank, and it said, if you're a for-profit business and you would like to give back to your community, if you give back to your community, give us, it was a 500-word essay. Let us know what it is that you do, and we are going to issue the winner of this grant. It's for $10,000. And so I'm usually procrastinate on everything.
Like we all do.
Yeah, exactly. I sat down. I wrote up, telling people about the haircuts. So I'm a for-profit barbershop. Valor Men's Grooming is a regular business, but we use the barbershop to bless people with haircuts and to try and mentor them into treatment or housing or whatever else is necessary. So I write that out, and I remember I had my wife kind of proofread it, and I said to her, I said, "Hey, let's say a prayer real quick." And she's like, "You got to pray to win?" I'm like, "No." I said, "I'm saying a thank you because I know this one's already done." And I just felt such confidence in that. And then 2 months later, we got a call. And I think there was, oh my gosh, 1,300 people submitted for it. And so it was a national contest. It might have been 13,000. But they chose Valor Men's Grooming, and they chose the Semper Fi Mission as the recipient. And it was with that first $10,000 that we were able to get the website, get all of our paperwork done, and like everything has just fallen into place. So with the Semper Fi Mission, we do prison ministry, homeless outreach, mentorship, and we have a recovery house. It's called the Cornerstone Residence. And each one of those pillars has expanded. Just briefly on the prison, not only do we go to the prison every Monday, we go out to a prison in Harrisburg, and we've been invited into some prisons in Ohio now. Back in June of this year, Ken, my partner, and I, we actually got invited to a meeting in Washington, D.C., and it was on prison reform. And we were able to go down and share our story. So there's a company, they're a for-profit business. It's called Viapath. Viapath owns all the tablets that a prisoner gets issued. Across the country, they own the majority of them. So when someone is incarcerated, whether it's on the city, the county, or state level, they get issued a tablet, and that's how they make phone calls. And they could access some basic movies and music and everything on there. Well, Viapath wants to give the Semper Fi Mission our own app on the tablet, and they want us to reach 180,000 veterans every day. Wow. So there's 180,000 veterans incarcerated in the United States that have these tablets, and they want to make the Semper Fi Mission app available to them. And so what that means is, we could provide podcasts, we could provide like recorded messages, testimonies, Bible studies. We're going to incorporate some music with it, and the guys can start to follow us. So on a funny side note, I was telling my son that this opportunity came up, and my son, he's like, "Dad, you're going to become like the Joe Rogan of jail," which I thought was a really good analogy and also lends some humor too.
Yeah, it's really good. So let me ask you some numbers here. I don't know. I'm fascinated with numbers. So you mentioned about the 180,000, right? Are they like the veterans, or is it the general populations of people in incarceration?
It's going to be general population, but across states, county, and local jurisdictions.
Right. So this morning you visited the Allegheny.
Yes.
Right. So how many people were in that veteran spot? Okay.
So I was at the veteran spot today. There's probably about 60 people total. And I think there was just under 30 people that actually sat with us. We do about an hour and a half presentation. We'll do some music.
Because it's not mandatory, like if they want to come in.
Correct.
That's the right thing.
Correct. But there's been times we've had as many as 50 or 60, and we've had as low as 3 or 4. But it averages between 20 and 30 guys. And then they start to get to know you, and they may be there 6 months, 8 months, 9 months. The longest that we've had anybody is maybe 14 or 15 months, because when you're in the county jail, it's under a 23-month sentence that follow us. But what we found is when people get out, they'll contact us. They'll come to my shop for a haircut. They'll go to church with me. We do an event downtown here once a month. And, I talked about going out and individually doing the haircuts for people, right? So about a year and a half ago, there was a nonprofit called Outreached Arms. They feed the homeless every Tuesday night. and they used the First Presbyterian Church downtown here on 6th.
Mm-hmm.
So the guy who runs that was coming to my shop for haircuts, and I said to him, "Hey, would I ever be able to go down and like maybe do some haircuts in between the meal, or And he's like, "Yeah, I'm sure the people would love it." Well, I went down and we did a sign up list. Who wants a haircut? And there was like 30. I'm like, I got an hour and a half. I'm going to get about 40 done. So that we did that, and I brought someone the next week. And so then I contacted the church, and I had a meeting with their board members. And I said, guys, we would love to use your space once a month on a Monday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Mondays are great days because all the barbers and hairdressers, most of them are off on Mondays, because we work Saturdays. So, and they said, "Well, what do you see happening?" And we said, "Well, what we'd like to do is anytime that we're getting people together, we want to provide food, clothing, hygiene items, but then also the haircuts." And I said, the reason we want to use a church setting is we would love to pray with every person. I talked to you earlier about just asking someone, "Hey, do you need prayer?" And it just opening up. So I said, "So we want to do prayer and haircuts." And one of the board members looked at me, he goes, "Hey, let's call it prayer cuts." So that's how we advertise it now. Prayer cuts is once a month on a Monday. We did one 2 Mondays ago. We had 125 people show up. We provided a Thanksgiving meal. We had tons of clothing and hygiene items, and we did 60 plus haircuts. So I have now a team of barbers and hairdressers. So if any of your guests are watching this, and if God has blessed you with the talent to cut hair, and if you would like to bless people with that talent for about 4 hours once a month on a Monday, I'm telling you, it would be. I have barbers and hairdressers that call me afterwards, and they're like, "Chuck, I just love this." The people, so we advertise that we cut hair for veterans and those in need. So we have people from the local shelters, we have people from the street, and then some of the local VA hospitals bus their men and women down.
So do they have to be veterans, or can they be anybody?
No.
Okay.
So what we also learned early on, and I'm glad you brought that up, was initially we were going to go out and try and find all the homeless veterans, But what we found, just like in the prison, they're not all veterans there. And if we walk out here on the streets, a very small percentage of them are going to be veterans. So we'd like to help everyone. But we kept the name because it means always faithful, always faithful mission. We're faithful to anybody. The only thing that's veteran only is our recovery house. Our house, you have to be a veteran because there are certain grants that we're going to apply for that are going to be for through government channels that require the person to be a veteran.
Okay.
And
how long have you had this prayers cut?
Prayer cuts. So officially, the Semper Fi Mission, September 18th was a year old, but we started the work before that. So 2 Mondays ago was our 15th prayer cuts.
Wow.
So every month, in addition to the prayer cuts, we set up on the north side, and we call it an outreach. We'll put a warm meal. We'll get a catered warm meal. We'll set up tables, and it'll be about our 16th or 17th one of those. And Ken and I laugh because the first time we did it, we had a table about this big with some clothes and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And we got people starting to come. If you look at our operation now, we've got 20 big tables, we've got tents, we've got heaters, we've got a warm meal. We're handing out boxes and boxes of clothes. We have 2 storage lockers now, 2 20 by 20 foot storage lockers, just to handle all the donations that come in. We have people that sort it. And so we're always doing food, clothing, things like socks and hygiene items. They're like gold on the street, to be able to provide anyone that's in need. And at each event, whether it's a prayer cuts or whether it's an outreach, there's always 1 or 2 things that happen that just blow me away, where people were touched. And what had happened 2 Mondays ago was the day after, a guy recorded a message. It's his testimony. And he said, I came to prayer cuts. I had a great meal. Chuck, and then there was another barber, his name's Frankie. Chuck and Frankie prayed with me. And then I prayed and I asked God for a job and a place to live. And he said, I've been homeless and jobless for months. He leaves downtown. He walks over to the south side and he's sitting on a bench. He was still feeling a little hopeless. A truck pulls up and the guy says, hey, are you looking for work? And he says, yes. He said, well, get in. And he drove him and he took him to these homes. This guy had purchased a number of homes in Pittsburgh that he's renovating. And he said, can you do demolition work? Can you break down walls? And the guy's like, absolutely. I have construction experience. And he said, well, let me ask you this. Do you need a place to live also? And the guy's like, yes. So one of the units that's already renovated, he's going to be staying at. Well, this has just become, we've connected with this business owner. The very next day, we send more guys over to him for a thing to work, for a job and for a place to live. And so this guy, he kind of said it the best. He's like, I just believed that prayer that they prayed over me, that my life was going to change. And he said an hour later, God got me a job. God got me a place to live. And the guy has also given these guys a truck to drive around. So there's always something like that. And it's amazing to see what God does and how support comes in. And we kind of have a Bible verse that sums up what we do. And the Bible verse is Matthew 6:33. And it says, seek ye first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things I'll add unto you. It's like, we feel like when we go after the people that nobody wants, God puts all the right people in our lives. Like,
right.
Someone like you calling me to do this. We've gotten asked to do so many things, or people have called and asked to help us. We haven't had to go out and solicit or do any kind of fundraisers. It's just like God just keeps opening the doors. And early on, one of the things that we found that we really needed was housing for veterans. And so we have what now it's called the Cornerstone Residence.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah.
So let me show people. Wait a second. Where is this? I thought I'd pull it up.
Yeah, the Cornerstone Residence. It was a former rectory.
Okay.
It's out in Clairton. It's a 13,000 square foot building. It's huge. It's multi-levels. When we check guys into it, they're like, I need a map for this building. But we have it divided into 10 units right now. They're 10 suites. Beautiful old stone building.
Okay, let me
located in Clairton on a bus route. We have some occupancy right now. We have openings for people. All they need to do is contact myself or Ken. Mm-hmm. They can go to the Cornerstone Residence website and you could just submit an application online. That is the only piece of our nonprofit that is veteran only. Mm-hmm. And again, that's because based on the grants that we're going to be applying for. But there are guys that we meet in the prison that then when they're getting out, they're actually being released to us at the Cornerstone House for their continuing treatment, for their probation and parole. It's just amazing to be part of it. What we've seen that's been the most impactful to me is it happened at one of our prayer cut events. I had a bunch of volunteers, and we all like to wear black T-shirts with little. I remind me to get you one. Well, so we have our volunteers all in T-shirts, so we kind of know. We kind of look like and on the back of our T-shirt it says God's Army. We kind of look like we're uniformed. And I was addressing the people that were coming for haircuts. So all those people were either homeless or living in a shelter. And I looked over at some of our volunteers, and I thought to myself, my goodness, these guys were in that seat 2 months ago. So I shared that. I said, you guys look over here at our volunteers. And I wanted to keep it anonymous, didn't want to point anybody out. Yeah. But I said, just a couple months ago, there were people that were in your seat that are now got their life figured out and they're volunteering with us. And like half the guys are like, that was me. I met Chuck in the jail. You know, it was kind of cute. But it's amazing to see, to make a lasting impact. And that's kind of what our goal is to help that person, to be like a cog in the wheel, to connect them to the treatment or connect them to housing or to a job, and then have them come out on the street or into the jail and help us uplift other people. And we also have some other things in the works here, and it's literally right around the corner from here. There's a building on the Boulevard of the Allies that there's a business owner would like to turn over to us. It's a 12-story building.
Wow.
And we would like to say they would be called the Semper Fi Mission Hope and Recovery House. And what we'd like to do different is we'd like to have everything under one roof. We would like to have workforce development along with short-term, medium, long-term treatment, the job training, like to get all the, when someone leaves a shelter now, they've got to go all over the city. We want to bring everything under one table: medical care, dental care. And we're believing God is going to open that door. So we're waiting to hear on some grants on that building. There is another businessman out in Beaver County that bought an old Catholic school that he's going to convert to 15 efficiency apartments. We have a grant submitted on there. How quickly everything has happened has just blown us away. But what we like to think, Will, is when you go after those people that nobody wants, and I tell that to our volunteers all the time. You're going to encounter people today that in any given circumstance, someone's going to be walking down the street and they're not going to make eye contact. They're going to cross the street to avoid that person. We're going to tell that person they're loved. It gets me, man.
Yeah.
I just love sharing God with people. And that love that you can't put into words. Like, no, you're important. We care about you. Call us if you need it. If you need anything. And my phone, I don't know if you've heard it throughout our broadcast here, is it's constantly going off. And I know I can't save the world, but I know God has put it on my heart. So when you look at my story, which started out great and then became a mess, God has took that mess and he's turned it into a message. And I wouldn't have the impact that I do inside that jail if I had not been there.
Yes.
If I could, I can relate to those guys what it feels like to sit in solitary. I can relate to those guys what it feels like to tell your family, hey, I'm going to be on the 6 o'clock news tonight, and we never realize it when we're going through it.
Mm-hmm.
How God has a better plan for us. And, God's a good God, the devil's a bad devil. And when you go on that path, you get the curses. But when you start to follow God, you get nothing but blessings. And it's been a blessing to share that with people and then to watch their lives change. And, we, with our prison ministry going national, we see the Semper Fi Mission would like to have a hub in every major city where there would not be a veteran left out on the street and without a place to live. And that's our goal. It's our purpose. And we know that with God, that can happen.
Certainly. And, with the story that you just told us, and also the way you're handling also things that have been given to you,
Mm-hmm.
due to your hard work and your passions. And I think it's going to happen. I think people see that it's so scalable, right? Right. If all those techie out there, my audience, like some of you are techie, this is completely scalable, right? This is completely scalable. Every big city or every city should have it, right? If you have an incarceration problem, then you should have it, because it's great. It's great, and it's very useful, and it's a direct service providers, really, right? And you help, like what Chuck just told us, that sometimes, it's not that it's a bad guy. He's not, but it's just the nuance. There's a story. There's a backstory behind all this. And sometimes you have to understand. If you have to have empathy, and to see, and probably what Chuck is doing, it's not a plan B. It's the original plan. It just has more curves than desire, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's that
plan.
serving and taking care of others, and going out. Yeah, it's still the same, but it definitely
It has
took,
more
took a
curves,
lot of
right?
twisty turns. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much for sharing your stories. It's inspiring, and I'm just thinking about it that we are in the Thanksgiving season, we are in the holiday season, and I think people should donate or should help. How can we help?
That's great, Will, for you to say that. First and foremost, that with social media, a big part of that is the number of people you can reach. So we ask you guys to follow us on Semper Fi Mission. It's on Instagram and Facebook. Our website, semperfimission.org, there's a donation tab. Please feel free to use that. We are always taking donations for clothing, hygiene items. If you want to buy a couple hundred pair of socks for us to hand out, socks are like gold on the street. We'll have people, like if you just connect with us on semperfimission.org, there's a volunteer tab. So you can click on the volunteer tab, how you can serve. You can fill out that information. We have so many drop-down boxes in there, ways to volunteer, whether it's your time, whether it's clothing, or whether it's a financial support. That's super helpful, super important. We like to keep engaging with our volunteers. We did our Thanksgiving meal and haircuts the 17th of November, I think it was. It was a Monday afternoon, and we had 38 volunteers. Just blew my mind that here it is on a Monday. Some people took off of work to do it, but they saw what an impact it was. And the other thing, if you are thinking of volunteering, when you see the gratitude that a lot of these people have, I'd say 95% of the people that we work with, they are so grateful for just simple things, the haircut, or grateful for a hug or a prayer. And you end up getting a lot more out of it than you give. That sense of, man, I made a difference today. And would love to have you come out and volunteer. And, we're always looking for, as we continue to expand, we're going to need to have partners like financial partners and business partners that want to be, maybe do a regular monthly donation. So we're still navigating all of that. And I appreciate the time to be able to get out, to get on here and to tell my story to a storyteller that's now sharing it with others. And that's, it's great.
Thank you. And the pleasure and the privilege is mine. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Will.